At this time, we're going to begin the memorial service here in our chapel for Mr. George Contarsy. As we begin the service, I would ask if any of you might have a cell phone or any other noise-making device, please turn them off at this time. Officiating the service here today is Rabbi Nancy Landsman, and the rabbi will begin the service assisting the family in the ancient tradition of Kriya. If I could ask the family members wearing ribbons to stand together in the front of the chapel.
Our hearts go out to you, Joyce, Elise, with Cynthia, and Sandra, and Susan, and Alan, and Dana, and Chrysa, and the whole family. We know all of your hearts are torn as we say goodbye to George, someone who I did not have the honor. It would have been a great honor to have known him. I'm so grateful to you and the others in the family who met with me to share the stories and memories of this incredible man. So our hearts go out to all of you. You have been given a black ribbon, a Kriya ribbon. Many times direct mourners will tear their clothing as a sign of mourning. An alternative is this black ribbon, which it's only the children who wear the ribbon on the left side over the heart, because there is no bond as unique and special as that between parent and child. Joyce, we know how beautiful your marriage was to George, and your heart is equally as torn. Before making a tear in this ribbon, there are traditional Hebrew words that are said, and I'd like the five of you to please repeat these words after me. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Ha'olam Dayan Ha'emet. These words mean, praised are you, eternal our God, ruler of the universe, judge of truth. From the bottom of the ribbon up towards the circular button, you can make a tear as little or as far as you would like. And Doug is there in case your ribbon is a little stiff. He can use a knife and help make that tear. You have the choice to wear this torn ribbon just today, or you can choose to wear the ribbon the first week of mourning or the period of Shloshim, 30 days. You also have a choice to wear this ribbon tucked in the inside, or you can wear it on the outside. As you go out into the world, if you're wearing this torn ribbon, hopefully people will understand that it means you are in a period of mourning, and they will have compassion on you. Please be seated. I want to thank all of you here in the chapel, as well as those of you joining us remotely. Thank you on behalf of the family for being here to lend your love and your support during this very difficult time for the family. We gather here, as sad as we are, to say goodbye to George. We're also here to celebrate his life. It is at such a time as this that we recognize the true values in life. We realize that all things fade and all things decay except devotion and love, faith and trust. And from what I learned about George, he gave these as a son, a brother, a husband, a father, a grandfather, a great-grandfather, an uncle, a relative, a friend. And he received from all of you an answering love and devotion. His affection, answered by your own, made a circle of love that, although one link is missing, will yet remain whole and strong. The link of memory will continue to join you together. He lived a pretty incredible life. And those of you who had the honor and privilege to know George, you know how blessed you have been to have had him in your life. I felt that this poem I'm about to read, whose author unfortunately is unknown, was very fitting for him. The poem is entitled, A Life Well Lived. A life well lived is a precious gift of hope and strength and grace from someone who has made our world a brighter, better place. It's filled with moments sweet and sad, with smiles and sometimes tears, with friendships formed and good times shared, and laughter through the years. A life well lived is a legacy of joy and pride and pleasure, a living, lasting memory our grateful hearts will treasure. Edgar Albert Guest wrote, "To live as fully as I can, to be, no matter where, a man. To take what comes of good or ill, and cling to faith and honor still. To do my best and let it stand the record of my brain and hand. And then, should failure come to me, still work and hope for victory. To have no secret place wherein I stoop unseen to shame and sin. To be the same when I'm alone as when my every deed is known. To live undaunted, unafraid of any step that I have made. To be without pretense or sham, exactly what men think I am. To leave some simple mark behind. To keep my having lived in mind. To play my little part, not whine that greater honors are not mine. This, I believe, is all I need for my philosophy and creed." I think we can all agree that George did not leave just some simple mark behind. He left a huge mark behind. And that's what makes this so difficult. And we look for comfort. And we often find this comfort when we turn to the book of Psalms. In your service folders, you find a psalm that I think speaks to all of us, regardless of our faith or tradition. So I'd like to invite all of you here, as well as those of you joining us remotely, if you know the words as well, let us all join together in the 23rd Psalm. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Perhaps you've been a lucky one to have heard any of the numerous stories that I understand George would tell. He was a wonderful storyteller, and he embraced humor. Vivian Wade wrote, "A sense of humor is important, as shock absorbers are to a car. It helps to get over rough patches that come to us near and by far. A sense of humor is really needed, as a tightrope walker needs a pole. It helps to keep us well balanced. It can cheer and make joyful the soul. A sense of humor is necessary, as yeast is to the rising of bread. When raising our voices in laughter, happiness to others will spread. A sense of humor is important. The Bible and Proverbs, we read, "A merry heart does good like medicine, which is very good medicine indeed." So as a family, you laughed a lot together. You listened to these amazing stories. And I think those of you in George's family know how important each and every one of you has been to George, and vice versa. As this unknown author of this poem I'm going to share states so eloquently, that having a family such as yours is really one of the greatest gifts that we can ever receive in our lifetime. In fact, the title of the poem is "The Greatest Gift." One of the greatest gifts that life can give to anyone is the very special love that families share. As years go by, it's good to know that there will always be certain people in our lives who care. For there are countless things that only families have in common, and memories that no one else can make. And these precious ties that bind a family together are bonds that time and distance cannot break. How fortunate we are when we have relatives to love us. It makes the world a happy place to be. Few gifts in life will last as long or touch the heart as deeply as the very special gift of family. Today we have a few of George's family members who are going to speak, and it is my honor to first call upon Susan.
On behalf of the family, I want to welcome you all to this celebration of George's life. His loss lies on us so heavily, and yet we know how lucky and blessed we were to have him in this world for almost 90 years. To begin, for those of you who might need the family flow chart, beginning 46 years ago, here's the story of a lovely lady who was bringing up 3 very lovely girls. Here's the story of a man named George who was busy with 2 children of his own, and Buffy. Till the one day when the lady met this fellow, that's the way we became the Contarsy Wishnick bunch. So while technically George was the stepfather to my sisters and me, there was no step in that relationship. Upon marrying Joyce, from day one, George treated and loved us as his own. Larry and Elise became our brother and sister. It wasn't easy at the beginning in a blended family with a 5-year-old and 4 teenagers pushing each other's buttons and running a little wild at times. But George and Joyce somehow managed the chaos and molded us into one family. In the obituary, we wrote, "George was loved by everyone for his extraordinary character, kindness, humor, storytelling, personal and professional insights, and the helpfulness he extended to everyone he met. I know I can't paint George as vividly as he did in his own self-portraits, but I'll try." George had impeccable character and kindness. He always put the needs of others above his own. Money was tight growing up, and he worked several jobs to save enough to go to college. But when his father had a heart attack and was unable to work, George left school and gave all the money he had saved for tuition to his mother. He went to work with his uncle to keep his father's law business running while his father recuperated. After marrying his first wife, Carole, George worked in retail and held a variety of jobs. Eventually, he moved into banking, where despite not completing college, he had a very successful career. Always honest and principled, he left 2 positions due to the shady practices of his employers, deciding he'd find himself another job rather than participating in anything unsavory. In the midst of his career, and well into his 40s, and now married to Joyce after Carole's untimely death, George decided to get that college degree he'd always wanted. And while still working full-time and raising children, he enrolled in National Louis University and completed his degree. We graduated in the same month, he and I, he with his college degree and I with my high school degree, which I thought was very cool. Given the number of times his children turned to him for help during our own college years, I'd say he also earned honorary degrees from NYU, Michigan, and DePaul. Anyone who ever met George also knows that he told great stories, mostly true, although occasionally it was hard to tell. He liked to tell vivid and laugh till you drop stories about his childhood and the antics of many eccentric extended family members. He also made up very clever stories about a wily rabbit connected to the Las Vegas Mafia, which he'd send in chapter installments to his grandson, David, while David was at summer camp. George especially appreciated satire, and his humor could run to the bawdy side. He was an avid reader of the funnies, in fact, the whole newspaper. Together, we would crack up over the Far Side cartoons. On his last morning, he and Dana and I were in stitches recalling a popular cartoon that you may know, a picture of a dog with a bubble coming out of the wrong end with the caption, "Did you take my bubble gum?" I think that was his favorite. Because he had read so much and had so much curiosity and interest in so many things, and with such varied professional experiences, George gave great advice and he listened with empathy. He'd believe in you even if others didn't or you didn't believe in yourself. Everyone turned to him with his problems. He'd help you with a strategy to get out of a rut. He'd help you buy a house or a car or get a loan. He'd give you school or career counseling. He could even give you a diagnosis for your puzzling medical symptoms and usually get it right and before the doctor did too. If you're in this room or watching this service by live stream, then George probably helped you in some significant way that made your life better. He helped put you in business, or he took you in when your parent threw you out, or helped you mend your marriage. He patiently took your phone calls from your assisted care facility and track down the right staff to fix your situation. He encouraged you to apply for U.S. citizenship and helped you to save for your retirement. When I was calling people earlier this week to share the sad news that we had lost George, nearly everybody shared with me a story about how George impacted their life so meaningfully. Above all, George was devoted to family. He took exceptional, loving care of Carole during her long illness, and after she died, stayed connected and close all these years with her Freed and Becker relations. Along with Joyce, he spent 20 years taking care of his mother, Sarah, Joyce's mother, Lillian, my paternal grandmother, Minnie, and her sister-in-law, Kathy. Every week was filled with errands and dinners with the Bubbies, schlepping them to and fro in the boat-sized banana yellow Lincoln Continental known as the Bubby Mobile. As a father to my sisters and me, he became a son to all of them as well, including the 2 Bubbies he inherited from my father, David. As for his children, George checked in and provided guidance and support to each through our schooling, our careers, and our personal and medical challenges. The greatest tragedy of his life was the loss of his son Larry at age 56, a deep grief from which he never truly recovered, intensifying the depression that occasionally gripped him. But George wanted to come to terms with loss, with decisions he'd regretted, or things he knew he could not control, and he bravely sought professional help. He worked hard at living his best life. Indeed, George found great happiness in his 8 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren who had great adventures with him while visiting Las Vegas. Where else can you go with your grandpa to a Seder in a casino? But more than anything, George was devoted to Joyce. He would always say in all seriousness that his #1 goal in life was for Joyce to be happy, and he lived his life with that goal always in the forefront of his mind and as the basis of every decision that he made. Together, he and Joyce had a 46-year-long wonderful marriage and partnership with lots of travel all over the world and a thriving social life with an extended network of friends and family, and outings to concert and theaters and restaurants. Oh, and lots and lots and lots of card games. On his last morning, George was asking Tracy, his friend and helper, who he loved like another daughter, and who slept in his hospital room every night while he was there, "Where's my bride?" When Joyce arrived, with me and Dana in tow, our having arrived late the night before, the smile on his face lit up the whole room. Now that he is gone, it feels as though there is a gaping hole in the world that cannot be filled. At the same time, we are so grateful for George's long and happy life and the wonderful marriage and family that he created with Joyce. We are grateful, too, that he died as he wanted, without any pain or suffering. He has left us in good hands because he left us with all of you who loved him too, and because he taught us, by his example, how to take care of each other. That's what he'll be wanting from us now, and that's what we'll do.
And now it's my honor to call upon Elise.
Thank you, Susan. It's a tough act to follow here, but I set myself up for it. I just wanted to share the earliest memory I have of my father. It was a snowy night, a Chicago blizzard. It was January, '67. I was about to turn 4. George and I ventured out onto Ewing, headed north to the corner grocery store on Church. I was walking behind him, tucked under his overcoat, following in his footsteps, protected by his strong frame, cutting through the wind and the snow. It's a blur of a memory, but a very durable memory. And it's really what foreshadowed the father I knew and loved, standing behind him, protected in his path. George was always there, caring and committed to those he loved. He was a clever man. He knew how to keep warm at a Bears game. He would crumble up newspaper and shove it in his sleeves and his pants. And it worked. He was funny, he was witty, he was insightful, he was curious. If we didn't know the answer to a question, he would pull out the encyclopedia, or he would just make up an answer. And as Susie said, if it was outrageous, it had to be true. His imagination had no limits. George Sultan Contarsy, a compass of compassion, his love and guidance will be forever missed, and our hearts forever broken.
And now it's my honor to call upon some grandchildren, David, Seth, and Ezra.
A couple of years ago, on Christmas Eve, we were visiting our grandparents in Vegas. It was the last time the three of us were out there together, and we were at their dinner table with our grandpa. He was asking us questions about our faith. What did Judaism mean to us? Why is it important to pass along to our kids? How should we appreciate our ancestors and their history? He really wanted us to think. Every Sunday, on the family Zoom call, politics inevitably lurk in. He'll ask me and my brothers, where do we get our news from? How do we stay informed? How do we interpret the events of the world around us? He really wanted us to think. In April, the last time I saw him, my grandpa revealed that he had always wanted to learn calculus, that he didn't get there in school and wanted to understand why it was so important. We grabbed some paper, a pen, and talked through some of the fundamentals and their applications in the world. He was the perfect student, engaged, asking questions, genuinely curious and excited to learn. Not only the mathematics, but in how I saw it and why I loved it. Our grandpa really viewed us and everybody he met as complete people. He wanted to know how we saw the world and made sure we thought critically about our lives. He cared about our passions and was always rooting for our success and happiness. That kind of pure and unconditional love is rare, and we're all lucky to have experienced it.
When I was 16 and a relatively new driver, I was driving my grandparents down Sheridan Road in Evanston, right along Northwestern, as classes had just let out. The sidewalks were packed with students. Grandpa George was looking out the window and asked me, "David, are you considering going to Northwestern for college?" I replied that A, I probably could not get in, and B, that it was too close to home and that I wanted to leave the Midwest. He replied, "Good, the women here are flat-chested anyways." Grandma Joyce quickly rebuffed him, saying, "George, the women here are smart." And Grandpa replied saying, "That's good, but it's not enough." That is just a taste of my grandfather's sense of humor. His dry and sarcastic humor was one of his many trademarks. As many here have already mentioned, he was a dedicated artist, a wonderful storyteller, and he deeply cared about others' interests and passions. I always enjoyed his childhood stories about growing up in Rogers Park as the youngest of three. I savored his stories about life in Chicago during the 1930s and 40s, his retelling about riding the State Street subway on its inaugural day of operation, and his story about his reaction to the news that John F. Kennedy was assassinated. A fun fact is that my grandpa took me to my first ever Cubs game when I was 7 years old. Although I enjoyed spending the day with him, I found the game itself quite boring. The Cubs played terribly, and we left by the 5th inning. My favorite part of that day, though, was him taking me on the L between my house and Wrigley Field. I guess that was a sign of the things to come. As many of you know, I did not get to meet my other grandfathers. Both my Grandpa David and Grandpa Chaim passed away long before I was born. And although Grandpa George was not my grandfather by blood, that did not matter to any of us, including him. He considered my brothers and me as his own grandkids and gave us the unconditional love and support that was so sacred to us all. Grandpa George did not believe in an afterlife. He made that clear to me repeatedly. However, he did once tell me that if there is indeed an afterlife, which he would then reiterate that there was not, he wanted to tell my Grandpa David that he took good care of his wife, his daughters, and looked after his grandkids. Well, Grandpa George, if you do cross paths with my Grandpa David, you can tell him that you successfully did all those things. In fact, successfully looking after all of us is a vast understatement of the love and care you provided to us all. Grandpa, I love you so much, and I will forever miss you. Thank you for taking interest in my passion, education, and early career. Thank you all for being here today.
There were a lot of things that I admired about my Grandpa George. His somewhat raunchy sense of humor immediately jumps to mind. I'm sure we will hear many more stories about times he made us laugh, but I wanted to add one of my own. When he gave me his car for my final semester of college, he left me very specific instructions not to use the prophylactics in the glove compartment because they were probably expired, and in his words, he did not want me to have children at my tender age. When you're a little kid, you think that adults know everything. And it wasn't until I was much older that I realized that this was far from true, except in the case of Grandpa George. He did actually know everything. Even in his 90th year, I never needed a GPS as long as I had my grandpa in the passenger seat, not just for directions, but for the history of the streets and the highways that we were on and how they had become what they were. But this curiosity wasn't just for facts or trivia. He was generous enough to extend it to the people around him, whether you were a friend, family, or a complete stranger. I remember on one of our many trips to Red Rock in Vegas, he wandered off on a whim with his walker and his oxygen to chat up a group of nearby bikers about their rides, what kind of bikes they were, and where they had gotten them, and how long they'd been riding them. This is the thing I've come to admire most about my grandpa. If something mattered to you, it mattered to him. If he came across something that made him think of you, whether it was a book or an article or a video, he would send it your way and call you later to discuss it. I actually brought one of those books with me. For those of you who can't see or are on Zoom, it's called Dirty Yiddish, everyday slang from what's up to F off. And even though he was an alta cocker and a bit of a mazik, he was also a mensch, and we will all miss him very much.
Wow, you guys did tell me that he had a great sense of humor, but I didn't know about all these stories. Holy cow. All right, last but not least, it's my honor to call upon Chrysa and Carolyn.
Before I start, I figured I would at least tell us a quick little story about Grandpa George, since we're all going off of on little fun stories on him. When I was last out in Vegas in 2018, I remember a couple months prior I had a bit of a spout with a friend of mine, and I asked Grandma Joyce, and I said, Grandma Joyce, what do you do when someone betrays you? What do you do? And Grandma Joyce, being Grandma Joyce, she gave the logical, reasonable answer, use your words, talk to them, and whatnot, okay? But she's like, go talk to Grandpa George, he would probably have a better answer, all right? So I asked Grandpa George, and he was in his office on his computer, and I asked him, I said, Grandpa, what do you do when someone betrays you? And without skipping a beat, not even turning away from his computer, he just says out loud, that's easy, you kill them. And to be completely honest, he's not wrong. But my grandfather was more than what words could ever describe. He lived a life full of adventure, love, laughter, and honor, bringing a light to every room he would walk into and a smile to your face no matter the situation. Grandpa George was more than just my elder. He was my friend, my partner in crime, my teacher, my guide, and my rock. Talking to him was always a joy, and he always answered the phone the same way. Carolyn, how are you, sweetheart? The memories we have shared over the course of a few decades will never leave me, from making the infamous yet never seen nor tasted snazzle and frizz, to the simple song he would sing about Waterloo the Mermaid. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to lose to your own grandfather in a game of Cards Against Humanity, well, I can tell you that it feels awkward yet satisfying to know that he has just as much of a twisted mind as you do. Grandpa George lived an incredible life, and he raised an incredible family. He was always interested in his grandchildren's lives and always wanted to be involved, to always be present, to be supportive. The legacy he started has lived on through all of us and through the lives of the people he has met. The imprint he has left on our hearts will forever remain. Grandpa George has taught the most important lesson anyone could ever learn. Live your life to the fullest it can be. Laugh, make jokes, join the CIA, love unconditionally, lose all your hair on the Manhattan Express roller coaster at the New York, sing songs about mermaids, and tell people you love them whenever you can. Experience it all. Grandpa, words cannot express the emptiness that surrounds us all. You will always be in my heart, and I will always love you.
Sorry. It was beautiful. Larry and I, we both felt we hit the jackpot when it came to our in-laws. I'd like to share a little story too. Many years ago, when Larry and I got engaged, George and Joyce so generously and graciously invited my parents over for dinner, a wonderful opportunity for both parents to meet and get acquainted. The conservative Catholic family meets the liberal Jewish family. And a great friendship was formed. It turns out that the Hallidays became a staple at many Contarsy Wishnick functions and vice versa. Once my sister Britta was at a party at Susan's home, and she noticed the family picture on the mantle. And front and center of that picture, lo and behold, is our mother. And Britta said, I know Mother gets around, I just didn't know how much. But that's how close we all were. I had learned how George headed the type of family who followed heart lines, not bloodlines. George and Joyce have always introduced me as their daughter, something that warms my heart every time I hear it. Did you know that George was one of the last persons to visit with my father before he passed? He was there in the last hour of his son's life, too. No matter the situation, you could always count on this man's generosity of his time. I was blessed to have a wonderful marriage to a man who was devoted to his family. Larry only mimicked what he witnessed from his father. It was from George that Larry learned how to be a good father and a husband who fulfilled his marriage vows, was kind, loyal, loving, and all backed with that quirky and dark sense of humor we've heard about. But I don't have to remind you of George's character and sense of humor. We all have the stories to share, and we're going to share a lot. He's built a permanent residence in our hearts and minds. His love and humor will carry on for generations. So rest in peace, George. What a blessing it has been to have you in our lives.
It's quite clear how loved George was. I always tell families in our meeting that I'd like all of you to speak first if we are going to have speakers, so that I'll just fill in whatever blanks might be left. And there really are not too many blanks left. You covered it all and then some. I will just add how he was truly a loving son to Edward and Sarah, and loving brother of Howard and Yvette. We know that none of us are going to live forever. What we don't know is when our time will come. And so if we can learn anything from the way George lived his life, let's do what he did. Let's live every day to the fullest and tell the stories and have laughter and have fun and be fully present when we're with others. Take a real interest in what somebody says to us. We believe in the Jewish faith that our spirit, our soul can live on, l'dor vador, from generation to generation. And the way that we believe this happens is by those of us who are still here continue to speak about George. Continue to share your stories, his stories. Document your memories in a variety of ways. Technology is always changing. I don't think a piece of paper is going to go out of style anytime in our lifetime, I could be wrong. But find various ways to document your memories so that future generations yet to be born will know about this incredible man who was so accepting, self-effacing, open, resilient, empathetic, kind, humorous, incredibly knowledgeable, understanding, accomplished, gracious, and loving man he was with a huge heart. That's how his memory will be forever alive. Know that you have all been a blessing to him as much as he has been a blessing to you. And I hope in the weeks and the months ahead that you will continue to lend support to the family during this difficult time. Cherish your memories, and may they be a source of comfort to you. Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the memory of the righteous is forever a blessing. And to that we say, Amen. I invite you to turn back now to your service folders for our two concluding prayers, the El Male Rachamim and the Mourner's Kaddish. If you are able to rise for these prayers, I invite you to please rise. El Male Rachamim Shochem Bamromim Hamasei Menucha Nechona Tachat kanvei hashchina im kedoshim uteorim ki zohar harakia et nishmat shalach leolamo ba'al harachamim yastiriu beseter kinafecha leolamim Bitzror hachayim et nishmato Adonai unachalato v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar Amen. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence among the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament unto the soul of George Contarsy, who has gone unto eternity. Lord of mercy, bring him under the cover of thy wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. be God's possession, and may his repose be peace. Amen. We turn to the back cover of our service programs for the mourner's Kaddish, a prayer that is said that the angels brought down from heaven. It possesses wonderful power. Truly, if there is any bond strong enough to link heaven to earth, it is this prayer. Many believe it speaks about death, but actually there is no reference to death. Rather, we affirm God's glory and omnipotence. So let us join together in exalting God's name with these traditional words of the mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, bi'alma divrach hiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imeru. Amen. Yehi shemei Rabbah, mevarach le'olam u'lomei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal, shemei dekudesha barichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran ba'alma v'imeru. Amen. Yehi shalama rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imeru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imeru. Amen. May the author of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort all the bereaved among us. And to that we say, Amen. Please be seated.
This concludes the memorial service here in our chapel. The interment will be a private family interment at a future date. The family will begin sitting Shiva immediately here in our funeral home. The Shiva will take place on the opposite side of the lobby in the North Chapel. When the service concludes, I'm going to escort the family to that room. When we open the outside doors to the public, you're welcome to go in. Otherwise, you can be in here or in the lobby, please. I'd like to ask all of you that are in attendance and those watching online to please take note. The family has asked that memorial contributions be made to the American Heart Association and the Colon Cancer Alliance for Research and Education for Lynch Syndrome. For those of you in attendance, that's on the inside of the service folder you should have received. If you did not receive one, they are available as you depart today. For those of you watching online, this information's on the website you're currently on. Also, for those of you online, we are going to be terminating the live feed in just a moment. At this time, I would ask everyone to please stand as the family and rabbi are escorted from the chapel. And again, as soon as they're ready to greet people, we'll open the public doors to the North Chapel. Thank you.